This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, Microsoft's launch day for Windows 11 is here, but does anyone know? Search and seizure laws in play with 3 different cases, why patch delays happen and 2 new tools from CISA, lessons on vaccine mandates, an increase in cloud consumption couples with a decrease in technology trust, Microsoft's 20% premium for monthly billing under fire, and Twitch's breach, the government's moves, and 2FA for all. All this and more. Hit that like and subscribe button, and here are this week's stories. I loved this lead on a Tech Republic article. You may be tired of reading about the Great Resignation and tempted to dismiss this dynamic in the workforce. The bad news is that this isn't a short-term trend. 3 new studies show that burnout is real and workers are acting on their unhappiness. Here's a sampling across that data set. 23% left without a new job to go to. 40% who had a new job chose it because of the ability to work remotely. 24% left because the new job offered flexibility in working hours. 22% felt more comfortable disclosing a mental health condition with their new employer. 4 in 10 people have not taken a sick day since they began remote work. 41% are working more hours to avoid giving the impression of slacking off. And 18% are worried that in-person workers are getting more opportunities. Of course, let's couple that with some other perspective. Owners. More than 1/3 of small business owners said they'd fire remote workers who don't return post-pandemic. More than 2/3 consider remote workers more replaceable, according to a Society for Human Resources Management survey. And will AI take away jobs? Rain looked at sentiments around AI and found that U.S. AI-related positions increased 21% in the last decade, and the average salary surged 27% during this time. Overall, 54% of respondents were very or moderately concerned about AI negatively disrupting their job across all industries. 36% of respondents believed AI will decrease the total number of positions. Education matters on that perspective. Those with a bachelor's degree were more than twice as likely to believe that AI will create more jobs in the future. Now, why do we care? You might be tired of these. Tough. This isn't a short-term thing. There's some real disruption going on here. It's often difficult to address these in an emotional terms that they require. Employees are making decisions about their lives after the emotional trauma of lockdown. This is not a pure business problem. I'll offer that those business owners drawing entirely on experiences of the past will be the ones who struggle in the future. Those that adapt will find ways to thrive. But there isn't a single answer to this problem. Businesses will find new creative options for employees and will likely partner with them in designing the work style of the future. Because that AI impact is there too. My take on that is that this is all transformational rather than destructive. It's just the transformation may have collateral damage for those who don't plan. Tomorrow is launch day for Microsoft. Office 2021 launches and final pricing was announced. Quoting The Verge, Office Home and Student 2021 will be priced at $149.99 and include Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Microsoft Teams for PC and Mac. Office Home and Business 2021 is priced at $249.99 and will include everything in the home version and Outlook for PC and Mac, alongside the rights to use all of the Office apps for business purposes. Windows 11 also launches tomorrow, but in a survey from Savings.com, only 38% of the more than 1,000 Windows users surveyed even knew Windows 11 was happening at all. Why do we care? Well, tactically, this all matters because tomorrow's the big day. Let's dwell more on that awareness data. I don't think this is pent-up demand, and that will be important. If you're depending on Microsoft alone for your awareness, I think you'll be sorely disappointed. That's not to say there aren't upgrade reasons. Windows 11 alone just likely isn't it. In a ruling last week on digital rights, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals confirmed that the police need to get a warrant before they can open email attachments. This is even true if a third party's automated system has flagged the attachments as potentially illegal. There's a twist here. The defendant was charged in both federal and California state court, and the California Court of Appeal came to the opposite decision. And to make this more complicated, there's a related case in Minnesota's Supreme Court around the expectation of privacy within a company's terms of service and how it impacts Fourth Amendment protections. Link to the Electronic Frontier Foundation for their statement on these cases. Why do we care? Privacy in the US is managed by search and seizure laws more than just about anything, so the way these laws are interpreted is important. This isn't fully fleshed out case law. While it won't be fixed overnight, tracking it to conclusion is why we care. CNN is reporting that the White House intends to hold a 30-country meeting on ransomware. The focus is on law enforcement collaboration and cutting down on ransomware payments. The current open question: will Russia participate? The first meeting will happen virtually. Europol has made 2 arrests in the Ukraine against ransomware operators in coordination with the FBI, French police, and Ukrainian National Police. The UK is planning to invest £5 billion in a cyber force, which will be focused on performing retaliatory attacks. Their focus will be Tier 1 attacks, critical infrastructure in hostile states like Russia, China, and North Korea. Congress is looking into the decision not to share the Kaseya decryption keys by the FBI. The House Committee on Oversight and Reform has demanded a briefing from the FBI over the matter. The House also saw a new bill introduced to direct Homeland Security to identify which digital infrastructure that, if attacked, would impact safety and security. They're asking the question: which of the 16 sectors currently labeled as critical are really essential? There's more budget there too. The SANS Institute and Nozami Networks report a survey saying that companies are investing more in industrial control system cybersecurity. 47% report their ICS security budgets have increased over the past 2 years, and 36% note remote access services as the initial vector for attacks. And finally, a new lawsuit from a patient whose pregnancy was impacted by ransomware. Tarani Kidd filed the suit claiming that Spring Hill Medical Center did not disclose critical patient safety-related information, including the fact that hospital operations and patient safety were compromised by the attack. The baby was diagnosed with severe brain damage at birth and died 9 months later. Now, why do we care? Those lawsuits are going to become more and more the story. This isn't the first link to a human death from ransomware, and it won't be the last. The consequences will be going up, and more importantly, the floor of what acceptable will be before we have discussions of criminal negligence. This case here flirts very close to my prediction of such a case to happen this year. I've included several moves on the law enforcement front to show the pattern. Not all proposed laws will happen. Some will. I think the FBI scrutiny won't go far. See my earlier statement that helping victims isn't the primary job of the Bureau of Investigation, and the critical infrastructure focus is more important. The laws happen, and more enforcement of them. I feel obligated to acknowledge the Facebook outage yesterday. Big outage. I'm sure you noticed. It seemed most of the planet did. It was a BGP and DNS issue. Why do we care? It's always DNS. I don't normally care about outages, as I outlined last week. 2 reasons to highlight this one. First, for international users, the impact to WhatsApp was material, as that's the basic communication tool for a good portion of the world. That makes this a significant communications outage. And that reason leads to the second. I'm linking this to the story about the VoIP outages from last week. Those VoIP outages are longer, and as I noted last time, it's the length there that matters. What I missed, which was pointed out to me by a vendor in this space, was that the move to VoIP These outages also impact critical infrastructure, phone service, 911 service, and the like. And importantly, most customers and their providers may have extensive disaster recovery plans for data and then not one for phone service. What's the failover plan there? I noted in another story that New Zealand is decommissioning its plain old telephone system next year. Failing over to POTS lines may soon be a thing of the past. And with the failure of WhatsApp as its replacement, particularly in non US countries, that's a thing. So there's a space here for continuity planning beyond data into this critical service. A global survey of 1,884 MSPs conducted by Strategy Analytics on behalf of Datto finds half of MSPs reporting their clients now have 50 to 75% of workloads in the cloud. Another nearly 20% report clients have 25 to 50% of their workloads running in that same cloud. The survey finds MSPs only saw a modest increase in revenue during the pandemic, while more than a third, 36%, saw no change. Nearly 20% saw revenues decline. Many MSPs also saw costs rise, with more than a quarter, 27%, increasing headcount. Spending on compute and storage infrastructure products for cloud infrastructure, including dedicated and shared environments, decreased 2.4% year over year in the second quarter of 2021 to $16.8 billion, according to International Data Corporation's Worldwide Quarterly Enterprise Infrastructure Tracker, the buyer and cloud deployment. The decrease comes after 6 quarters of year over year growth, and most notably compares to the 39.1% annual growth seen by the market in second quarter of 20, when the world just entered the pandemic, with the first wave of business and country closures causing a spike in investments in cloud services and infrastructure. And I continue to track the sentiment on big tech. It's down again, per a study from the Public Affairs Council and Morning Consult. 32% say tech is less trustworthy than other sectors. It used to be top of the list on trust from 2012 to 2017. Then it fell to fourth in 2018, fifth in 2019 and 2020, and now sixth place. Why do we care? Let's not kid ourselves about the damage to the reputation of technology. That should color any provider's approach, because establishing trust is key, and that's much harder now. Last week, some data told us it's nearly a majority using SaaS and cloud. This week's data says the same thing. I'd be remiss if I didn't observe that IT service companies are tying their fate to cloud providers in this shift. That doesn't mean not to do it. It means focusing on communication, consulting, and advising style services that both establish trust and keep some distance from the providers. Planning for failures and business continuity, including phones, as we talked about yesterday, builds on that approach. Threats to client data constantly evolve, so your strategies must evolve too. But knowing where to get good guidance isn't always easy. Well, nowhere will you hear more helpful insights from leading cyber protection experts than at the Acronis CyberFit Summit. I'm going again this year in person in Miami, and you should join me. Experts like Eric Simpson, Larry Walsh, and Acronis' Amy Luby will show you how to boost profits, reduce risk, and improve your team's productivity, as well as the latest cybersecurity strategies, technologies, and processes, in person and online. Learn more about the Acronis CyberFit Summit World Tour at acronis.events. How about some perspective on change from teachers? A poll by Khan Academy found that more than 3/4 of teachers plan to update the way they work in the classroom, blending old and new teaching methods based on the pandemic. While I'm thinking about the changing landscape, 53% of 230 verified Google workers said in a survey for Recode that was conducted by workspace community app Blind that they would think about leaving the company if they moved and had their pay cut. That's a bit less than the 68% of all professionals on Blind who said so. That parallels future forum surveys saying 44% of executives in this group want to be back in the office full time, compared to only 17% of employees who are excited about that schedule. The report pinpointed one reason for this disconnect: Executives have much higher job satisfaction than employees, 62% higher. Also, over the past quarter, executives reported a 3% increase in overall satisfaction with the working environment, while employee satisfaction dropped 5%. Why do we care? Teaching is an occupation that has a certain degree of traditionalism associated with it. When teachers are changing their behaviors in this way, it's a sign. That disconnect between executives and employees is where my head is at, and it makes a lot of the conflict make more sense. If management is disconnected from mainstream and a lot happier with the status quo, the divide is a lot more obvious. Smaller companies should be able to overcome this a lot easier, but it may not entirely be obvious. Opportunity for sure, and let's not assume it's easy. Well, the lead story has to be Twitch. In a massive hack, the company's source code, business data, and payouts have all been released in what appears to be a very targeted hack. The hackers have labeled this as Part 1 and appear to be focused intentionally on the company's own tools and information, not personal account information. If you're interested in digging in more, there's also a Verge article reviewing the bad security practices that led to this, including lack of management concern, employees raising issues of security, and not even disabling previous employees' accounts. So, that discussion about disclosures, how does 48 hours sound? Another piece of legislation titled the Ransom Disclosure Act proposes that number for disclosure of payments. It also requires Homeland Security to publish disclosures and make that information available to individuals. Wondering why disclosure matters? Ars Technica is reporting of an issue with SMS routing that's lasted 5 years. Revealed in an SEC disclosure, the firm responsible has released little additional information, but with Twitch being hit, that's not even the biggest breach news of the week. Oh, and the US government is now going to sue any contractors who hide breach incidents. Under the new Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative, government contractors are accountable in civil court if they don't report or fail to meet required cybersecurity standards. The US government is also introducing regulations for railroad and airport operators, which include naming a chief cyber official, disclosing hacks, and having recovery plans. And the DOJ has also created a team to investigate cryptocurrency-related crime. Google has announced that they are auto-enrolling 150 million accounts into two-factor authentication by the end of the year. It seems it does need to be forced. A report by the National Cybersecurity Alliance and CyberSafe shows the disconnect between IT pros and the public. 48% of respondents have never heard of multi-factor authentication. 31% never, sometimes, or rarely patch. Only 43% create unique passwords always or often, and only 46% even use different passwords. 20% never or rarely do. Then again, research by the Insurance Bureau of Canada reports that 47% of small business respondents say they don't allocate any money at all to cybersecurity. And speaking of Google, Forbes reporting is revealing that the US government is ordering data on anyone typing in certain search terms. These keyword warrants are broad requests for information on individuals looking for specific keywords, and they're looking for a subject. Arizona has opened a new cybersecurity command center to pull together resources to manage the state government's information security. Now, why do we care? Expect to see more of these state-level operations centers. Twitch is an extreme case to consider. What would happen if everything about you or your customers was published? Remember, this is what happens if a ransomware operator releases all of a customer's data. We have, playing out in real time, an example of that release of data. It's happening in a very public way, and with a company that has some pretty good broad recognition, and is owned by Amazon too. This should be very relatable to customers, who, the data tells us, are going to need to be forced on security. Note that Google story. If they can force their users to multi-factor, any IT services company can too. I previously covered Microsoft's announcement of changes to pricing for most Microsoft 365 SKUs on March 1st, 2022. The effort is called New Commerce Experience, or NCE. Within that announcement, there is an additional 20% premium for those on a monthly billing status rather than a yearly cost. NCE will impact Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, and Windows 365. Quantities cannot be downgraded during a term, and if sold via partners, they would be committed if the end customer doesn't pay or goes out of business. The company announced on Tuesday that they're adding more time to the transition and has added some incentives as well. There's a petition online to change this. Almost 900 signatures are associated with that at the time of this recording. Now, why do we care? Changes to the billing of these subscription Microsoft products makes a difference, and a 20% additional premium to the month-to-month seems pretty steep to me. I'm not necessarily going to buy into theories that this is to force partners out of the way. I'll offer that this could be a space for distribution. As we saw in the pandemic, distribution's superpower is the ability to leverage financial resources to help providers. I'll leave it to individual listeners to decide their approach. Push back on Microsoft, find a solution with distribution, accept the change, or something else entirely. First on this story, broadband. The vast majority, 87% of enterprises, are planning to increase their connectivity budget over the next 2 to 3 years. That's according to a recent Quartus study. Why? A desire to increase operational efficiencies and support business requirements. But interestingly, enterprises are unhappy with the public networks too. 63% of enterprises reported reduced productivity and efficiency because of them. They also cited poor customer experiences and security concerns. Then, cloud. European resellers are preparing for a big push in the cloud in the coming year, with 49% preparing now. 73% of resellers are seeing customers accelerate the rate of digital transformation due to the pandemic, and more than half, at 51%, say the cloud is driving this surge. Why do we care? Even big companies think the broadband providers suck. The article I'm linking to says the bandwidth problem is an opportunity to sell private networks. Okay, sure. For me, I guess I'm more interested in knowing why the marketplace is allowing such lowering performing networks to exist. Embrace of the cloud is the trend, and one would think that the telco providers would be supporting that. They do in marketing, but all the data says they actually suck at implementation and competition is low. It's too capital intensive a market to expect an easy disruption, however. A private network answer also isn't a good SMB answer, and of note, the gap between the haves and the have-nots just gets wider if allowed to continue. If you're in SMB IT, you should care about the FCC's efforts here. The New York Times covers the decision-making process within United Airlines in regards to vaccine mandates and their decision to implement one. United was an early mover on implementing a mandate, and their workforce is diverse. The racial breakdown of the company roughly matches the U.S. population, and employees range from professionals with advanced degrees to workers who haven't finished high school. Here's the punchline. It's been a success. Out of the 67,000 or so employees, the number who have failed to comply dropped below 240 as of last Friday. And a stat to note out of this. United has received more job applications for open positions than previously, by a significantly higher ratio. For 2,000 flight attendant positions, the company received 20,000 applications. United executives also indicate they've been surprised by the positive feedback, which has far outweighed any criticism. Now, why do we care? So much for the worker shortage, huh? I'm highlighting this story as an example of leadership. United executives saw the problem, tracked the options, were among the first movers to what data was indicating is a popular position, and are benefiting from first mover positioning. That said, you don't have to be among first to take advantage of positioning like this. It's a great soundbite to make this polarizing. The data doesn't say it is, and the market isn't either. A final tidbit this week, following up on that DDoS attack on bandwidth.com. The company notified shareholders to expect its total revenue for the quarter ending September 30th to be reduced by, quote, an amount between $0.5 million and $1.5 million. Bandwidth attributed the projected decline to, quote, lost transaction volume and the potential customer credits related to the attack. The company is reporting their network has been stable since September 29th. Why do we care? This is a data point on this story. I'm learning about some of the risks associated with phone portability and highlighted earlier this week about the lack of continuity planning as it relates to phones. My question here, that I don't have an answer to, is if this financial impact is enough to change their approach. Financial incentives matter, so we're tracking the impact on this one. It won't be immediately apparent. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSP Radio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.